sweetheart, you don't want to be with this person. If you start feeling like you're not heard, if you're starting to feel like you're not seen, if you're starting to feel like you're not understood, then there's no point of you being there. And I'm not saying crash out. Maybe I am, because I definitely did. Okay, the couple moved. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall I say. I did write notes how helpful they're going to be in this situation. Probably not that helpful. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I am single after almost 7 years of being in a relationship. The main reason why I didn't want to talk about it is because I feel like when you talk about things, it kind of gives people the right to have an opinion on things. But I realized the privilege of having like my own channel and have my own ability to edit and talk about whatever I want to is the fact that it's my space and nobody has the rights to my space. And I think talking about it helps a lot because, you know, it helps people not feel as alone. So especially if you're someone who's like me, I was in a relationship from 17 to 24, and to spend that with one person and then that person not be in your life anymore, it's very shocking and scary. And I thought maybe talking about it would make it less scary. And let's start with, what should I talk about? Let's start with how the first couple weeks went, because I feel like this is the part where a lot of people avoid going through this. And I think that's when people go back to relationships that maybe weren't meant for them, because the first couple of weeks is so overwhelming and so painful. When the breakup first happened, I felt like someone took the air out of my lung. It truthfully was one of the worst experiences of my life. It was so painful. There were times where I would like fall to the floor crying and couldn't get up off the floor. I think the biggest issue at this time, and a mistake that I made, was I stayed in contact with my ex-partner. Stayed in contact with them because I felt as if maybe, just maybe, if I show them different versions of myself and I continue to talk and conversate with them, they'll find the ability to like me enough to want to stay in the relationship with me. That wasn't the case, obviously. I think it's so easy to feel like you have to change yourself to have the people around you love you. And I don't think people who truly love you would need that. I started to realize, especially after these first couple of weeks of going through all the emotions that come with a breakup, I started to realize that when it came to this relationship, I was changing so many aspects of myself that were important aspects of myself, because to me, having a relationship with this person was more important than me loving myself and caring for myself. And that's not love. That's a very dangerous emotional attachment to a human being. It's a very overwhelming and painful thing to admit, but especially within the last couple years of this relationship, I gave up on caring about what I wanted to do, and my main focus was to be what I needed to be for this person. Granted, I probably wasn't that good at it if the person is not in a relationship with me right now, but one thing that I started to realize is that if a person needs you to change so many aspects of yourself, they never really liked you that much in the first place. You shouldn't be in a relationship with potential. You should be in a relationship with reality and what's in front of you. If someone's with you because they expect you to be something later on in life, then they don't actually like you or love you. And that's a harder pill to swallow, I guess you could say. And that's why I'm saying that the first couple weeks is really important, because you're able to realize those things instead of constantly going back and forth with this person and holding on to this hope that if I change this much, if I do this thing, if I smile more, if I do this, then this person will love me and want to be with me. And I do sometimes wonder why we do that, why we think the love of one person is more important than love within ourselves. Truthfully, as someone who's been out of this relationship for a couple of months, I will say that I think the reason that I did that was, one, I was with this person for so long, I didn't know what life was without them. So I was so anxiously attached to them, I guess you could say. And I just didn't know how to do life without them. And life without them didn't feel like a life at all. And if that meant living so far away from my true self that I was a stranger to myself, I was willing to do it. But once I went through these first couple weeks too, I realized, what was I even fighting so hard for? The best thing for me and my mental health and my healing was to completely separate myself from this person. It wasn't good for me to think that way, to think that if I change this way or I have this conversation with this person, if I dress a certain way when I see them, that they'll want to be with me. When I started realizing those unhealthy things that I was doing, it was detrimentally affecting my mental health. I made the decision to go no contact with this person. That was a hard decision. I needed to have a life that was completely separate from this person to realize my worth in what I wanted from myself. When I went no contact with this person, I think the grief of the relationship started to hit me a little harder. A lot of people think that when you're grieving a relationship, you're grieving the relationship ending. And I think what you grieve more is the life that you expected with that relationship more than you're actually grieving the person that you were with. That is true, and that was the case for me. But I will say the majority of my grief actually came from when this person was no longer in my life and my life still went on. I kind of thought that I would fall apart and everything would be different and I would never get out of this cycle of heartbreak and self-hatred and constantly thinking of what ifs. What if I smiled more? What if I was nicer? What if I didn't tell them my true feelings because it made them uncomfortable? What if I didn't do that? I started to realize once I actually started going more through the breakup and those things weren't happening, I started feeling sad because I thought maybe I should be falling apart more than I actually am. But I think it showed how much that breakup was actually needed for me and for my growth, because especially the last couple years of that relationship, I don't think it was fulfilling, especially at least for my perspective. I stayed in that relationship because it was a long-term relationship and I was with this person for a very long time. And I stayed with them because that's who was there. That was my comfort. And when you put comfort in a person, the idea of having a life without them seems unbearable. But then you do it. You kind of start living your life and being separate from this person, and you start seeing things in a different light, and you start looking at life from a different lens, and you start appreciating different aspects of yourself and your growth and who you want to be. I realized within the first couple of weeks after the breakup, I actually fell apart, not because of the loss of love that I had for this person. I think it was the loss of respect, the loss of this facade that I put on myself and on this person and on the relationship in general. And I started to see things that I didn't see before, not always necessarily bad. I started to see that truthfully, I wasn't necessarily happy in that relationship for a long time, and I didn't want to admit it because I was so obsessed with the idea of just spending the rest of my life with this person. I should have been more obsessed with spending the rest of my life with the true version of myself. And truthfully, who I was with this person was just not who I am as a human being. And I think like if I were to get back in contact, I don't even think they'd be able to recognize who I am because I'm not the person who was in that relationship at all. And within the last couple of months, I have changed so drastically that I just don't feel like that person aligns with me. And that kind of goes into the conversation of like a lot of people question when is the right time to leave a relationship. As soon as you start questioning it to that point, it's time to go. If you start feeling like you're not heard, if you're starting to feel like you're not seen, if you're starting to feel like you're not understood, then there's no point of you being there. That's not a relationship, and that's not what love should be. That is just a hollow hole. I don't know how else to explain it. You're at the first couple of weeks, you're so raw and you feel every emotion. One privilege that comes with that is the fact that you finally see true feelings that you hid to your core. That's why I think it's so important when young women or even young men or anyone who's going through a breakup, I think it's important to go through those first couple of weeks and really feel those low points, because those low points will show you things that you never saw before. And I'm saying this now a couple months later as a more healed version. If you're like freshly in it, you're probably like, shut the fuck up. But let me hold your hand. If you feel like you're in a relationship right now and you're not happy and you feel so overwhelmed with the fact that you don't know if you want to be with this person. Sweetheart, you don't want to be with this person. And you shouldn't wait until you get to the point where you hate this person to actually leave. You're not as stuck as you think you are, and you don't lack love because one person is missing from your life. And that's another important thing that I want to kind of touch on. After my breakup, the support that I had from my family members, more specifically the woman in my life, it changed me completely to my core. How much the women in my life have stepped up for me, there are no words to describe it. or even to thank them. Especially when I was at my low moments, I'm not the type of person to, I talk about my feelings on the internet, which is so funny that I'm going to say this, but I'm not the type of person to actually talk about my feelings or even acknowledge them as I'm feeling them. But one thing that I will say is, even if I was down and I didn't necessarily tell my family members, they always knew what to do. When my breakup happened, I was not eating. I just didn't want to eat. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do anything. But every time I walked downstairs, there was food made for me by my mom. She would always do this slick thing where she would be like, oh, I made something for your father. Just try this. I made a little bit for you. It's not too much. I just wanted you to try it. But in reality, I would go into the kitchen and I would go into the refrigerator and it'd be a full-blown meal. And my sister, she would bring my niece over. A part of her, I think, knew I wouldn't get out of bed unless my niece was there. That definitely changed my perspective, because I thought for so long, if a person wasn't in my life and they chose to be out of my life, that meant that I lacked love in my life. And those two very small examples show that I will never lack any type of love in my life, and I will never lack any type of love within myself because someone chose not to be in my life. If anything, that shows how much they lack love within themselves, and they lack the emotional ability to continue loving relationships like that. And truthfully, that's their business and that's not mine. I'm now at the point where I'm saying I don't think it's my responsibility to help someone through something anymore. I don't think it's my responsibility to fight for things that are not meant for me. And that's another stage of going through heartbreak, is you kind of start to see that if you do everything this person wants you to do, if you become everything they want you to be, if you smile more, if you do flips and handstands in the bedroom, I don't know, this person will love you. But then you start to realize you have absolutely no control over how people feel about you. The only control you have is whether or not you are a loving and caring person in their life. To be a loving and caring person does not mean you need to completely destroy yourself and forget who you are. And once you realize that, you start to realize that many relationships that you have, whether it's romantic or platonic, are just not fulfilling for you, and they're just not aligning with you. I've been doing this thing where, especially, I still get like things that I get upset about when it comes to the relationship and the breakup. And the thing that I've been doing is I say, well, is any of it in your control? Is any of it in my control? And when I sit there and I ask myself that question, I start seeing different things, and I start understanding, well, I did love this person. I gave everything to this person. I even stopped loving myself for this person, whether they asked me to or not, and they still don't want to be a part of my life. Did I have any control over that? I didn't. And truthfully, I don't think with my true soulmate in the love of my life, I would be asking myself some of these questions. And I think that's also what is making this breakup a little bit easier for me. I don't think nobody will ever want to be with me. I don't have this idea that I'll never find someone who understands me like this. I don't have those opinions and thoughts. And I think that's what makes a breakup a little bit easier too, because being surrounded by so much love and so many amazing platonic relationships and spiritual and emotional relationships with other people, it makes me realize that even if I don't find a romantic partner that aligns with certain aspects of myself, it doesn't mean that I lack love completely in my life. And with that, it brings me peace, and I'm kind of okay. I'm like talking about my heart breaking apart, man, and he's just like chilling. But I will say this, closing statements to all of the women, little girls, little boys, they, thems, period, to anyone who's going through this experience with me. The best thing you can do is feel. Go through every emotion that you need to. Go through the denial, the delusion, because girl, that was me. Go through the sadness, the happiness, the anger. Feel everything that you need to feel. Go to the hair salon, chop off inches of your hair, dye your hair, get the tattoo that you've been wanting, wear the outfit that maybe your partner told you not to wear, sleep with who you need to sleep with, feel every single thing and go through every single emotion that you need to. And I'm not saying crash out. Maybe I am, because I definitely did. And travel, do the things that you didn't do before, do the things that you were afraid to do before. And there's going to be feelings that arise and they're going to overwhelm you at times, and at that point, I would say go to your community. Just because someone is no longer in your life and someone who you once loved is no longer there, it doesn't mean that you don't have people who love you. Especially me, if you're watching this video, I love you. It doesn't mean you lack any love. I will say that even though the relationship ended, I don't regret it. I think every part of my life has been a lesson that grew me into the person who I needed to be. And I think this person showed me what love was in many different ways. And this person showed me to bring my wall down and actually be able to unconditionally love someone. And that is a beautiful thing. And I think that was the lesson that I had in the beginning of the relationship. And towards the end of the relationship, the lesson was to know when to love someone enough to walk away and know when someone isn't for you anymore. So yeah, I closed that chapter of my life, but my story didn't end, and that's kind of the lesson I wanted to tell you guys. Life doesn't end when someone decides to walk out of it. That's the beautiful and painful thing in a way about it, but just know you'll be fine. It sucks right now. I get it. I sadly get it in more ways than you could ever know, but you'll be okay. I love you guys. See, you don't lack any love. I'm right here with you. Bye, my lovelies.